Hello, it's Osondu. Hello from Palermo to Providence, Rhode Island. Welcome and thank you for accepting to be in dialogue with me.
Very excited to talk to you at last.
And me too, of course, me too. And it's also nice to create this further bridge. You know, we are within this great framework, Afropean bridges, and we are really creating, you know, a geographic, a cultural, and also time zone bridge between Italy and the United States, where you're located right now. So, buongiorno to you.
Buongiorno. Buongiorno. Bridges are really even more important in this day and age, considering the political atmosphere and considering the pandemic, where everyone seems to be locked in. I think that bridges are important, especially even more so metaphorical bridges that transcend, you know, space and time like this. So even if there was a physical bridge between Palermo and Providence, we wouldn't have been able to use it right now, but we have this medium, which is a bridge that transcends all of that, and I'm able to talk to you. So that's a great thing.
That's great. I agree. And it's a virtual bridge, but it's also, as you said, a metaphorical bridge, a spiritual bridge, an intellectual bridge, and a cultural bridge.
That's the
in this bridge, there is, you know, a further bridge, because you're from Nigeria and you're in the United States. I spent many years in the United States, but I'm back in my hometown, Palermo, in Sicily, of all places, in Italy. Yeah. So let me ask you a first question. How come you're there? How did you end up in Rhode Island, of all places?
Please don't add of all places. It's not like Alaska. Yeah, I came to the United States principally to attend grad school like you did. You went to UMass Amherst. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. It is.
Yeah, UMass Amherst. But I went still in the Northeast. I came to Syracuse, New York. Principally to attend grad school for creative writing, where I had the privilege of studying with a couple of writers like George Saunders and Mary Gateskill and Amy Hempel, Arthur Flowers, Christopher Kennedy, a bunch of writers who I'd heard about and who I wanted to study with. So that's how I came to the United States to attend grad school at Syracuse. After Syracuse, I taught in a couple of places, University of Maryland, College Park, and a couple of places. And then I got a tenure track job at Providence College in Rhode Island, a place that I'd heard about, you know, even while I was growing up in Nigeria. There's the chicken that's known as Rhode Island Red. That was the first time I had of Rhode Island. Rhode Island Red, it's you know, a species of chicken. So that's it. So I ended up here. That's just the short way of.
Yeah, we really have parallel stories, because I also left my native island to go study in the same part of the world. Yeah. Of all places, referred to the fact that we come from warm places and we ended up in the freezing cold. I will never forget the cold. So I hope that you're coping with it after all these years.
Very true. You know, it's weird and interesting, because talking about the cold, people talk about culture shock, but weather shock is even rougher, more difficult to deal with. I remember that I'd emailed, you know, those were the early days of email before it became really common. But before I came to grad school, it was you go to a cyber cafe and you send an email, and then the next day you go back to the cyber cafe and check your email. So I emailed this person who was to be in my cohort in grad school, and she said, "Oh, you know, you see, I have to tell you, it gets really cold in Syracuse. So I hope brace yourself." And I said, "Oh, I'm not worried about that. I have like half a dozen cardigans that have served me over the years." And she said, "Cardigans?" and put a question mark. And she didn't say anything. It was months later when I got to Syracuse that I realized that cardigans for winter in Syracuse is like it's a joke.
Yeah.
You know, but one never gets used to it. But there was something Baldwin said, about something, and he said it's like waiting for winter in Harlem. It's going to come, it's going to be hard, but you just accept it.
Yeah. You're ready for it in a way. You're ready for it. But I know exactly what you mean. And I agree with you. It's not, everybody talks about culture shock, but there's also a physical shock, so to speak, that has got to do with the fact that we are embodied individuals. We're all in our body. And even when we have, as we did, let's face it, privileged experiences of migration, there is an existential aspect to migration from one hometown, from one place to, a new place. Even when you go for, in the most privileged way or with the best intentions, there is always an adjustment that needs to be made. And in a way, this is really what your young character in this novel, I will read the title in Italian. Oh my God, this is wonderful. Okay. Stereo. Quando il cielo vuole, spuntano le stelle. The young protagonist of your novel, the title in English is When the Sky is Ready, Stars Will Appear, will shine.
Yeah.
And, there is this young man who is from an unnamed African country, but from a village called Gulu Station, who decides to leave his hometown, his village, to pursue, his dream, which is reaching the city of his dreams is Roma. And, of course, this protagonist in a way reminds us of all the young men from different parts of Africa, not only, but, especially, from the four corners of Africa who arrive in Italy, looking for, democracy, jobs, better life conditions, and so on and so forth. On the other hand, the tone of this journey is even fable-like. It's really a coming-of-age novel. It's a Bildungsroman. It's a wonderful rite of initiation that you describe and you narrate in this novel. I would like for you to tell us a bit, about this experience, because, I have to tell you something. Yeah. I taught this novel last semester in my master's class at the University of Palermo. You're a professor. I'm a professor as well. And I taught a course specifically on Nigerian literature. The first texts were more, the classic texts, Tutuola, Achebe, Shoinka, and then they read all the contemporary novels.
You book on Tutuola, by the way.
Yes, I do. And they of course relate. They related extraordinarily to this novel, to your novel, also because we are in Sicily, which is, the arrival point of what the UN calls the Central Mediterranean route. Yeah. And they said, this is the story that we hear every day in the news, but from a different perspective. Yeah. So they were mesmerized by that. They were really captivated by your novel, by your language. But this is so important to hear this story from another perspective, as they would put it, but also in such a, light, beautiful, profound tone. So it doesn't have anything to do with your life, though. And this is what they were asking me all the time. Is this autobiographical? They were in a way, confused by the first person narrator. So I will just zip and I will let you tell us more about it, please.
Yeah. You might think that, here I am, a professor in the U.S., probably migrated through a different route, didn't have to go through the harrowing route that some other people take. And so mine is different. But I have to say that I do share some things in common with the young protagonist in this novel. But let me even back up a bit and say this. that it's interesting that when we think of characters like this and when we think of migration, we think of it in one direction. We don't think of it in the direction of those who we learned about in elementary school, who also moved in a different direction. People like Vasco da Gama, who are called explorers. Who were these people? These were also adventurous young men and young men, for the most part, who have heard of these exotic places, who have an idea, a picture of what these exotic places are like, who were seeking their fortune, who had people to impress, who wanted to see the other parts of the world, who were bitten by the wanderlust bug, but who also wanted to see how other people lived, explore other geographies, other locales, other places. Okay? And then they got on their boats, definitely not the gondola, but they got on their very large, colorful, decorated boats, and they moved in the direction of Africa. Okay? They were seeking their fortune. Some of them were people who were principally after money. Some of them were seeking for knowledge. Some of them were seeking for experience. But definitely there was this mental picture that they had from the map that says, there be dragons. And so some of them also wanted to know, was this continent filled with dragons? And so they came. When they came, they were not seen as exploitative. They were not given a cold welcome. They were not seen as people who had come to destroy. They were not seen as people who had come to loot, even though many of them came with this exploitative tendency. They were welcome. So they moved in that direction. They came. And actually, there was no rule, there was no custom, there was no immigration telling these explorers not to come to Africa. Okay, so we tend to forget that. And so we talk about this move today, this, wave of migrants, as if it has always been in one direction. But before many of the ancestors of these people who are moving today were born, there had been a huge move on the part from Europe to other parts of the world, even more so to Africa, looking for spices, looking for resources, looking for, the exoticism of Africa and all of that. So there was that move. So again, you might say, well, we are part of that long line. We are all connected, both those who moved to Africa and those who moved to Europe. And each of them have dreams. Each of them have mental pictures of what the other place looks like. Okay? And so it's also possible that even for someone like you and I, before we came over here, we had this mental picture, of what does the United States look like? How is it going to welcome me? This mental picture, is it the same as the physical picture? I tell people that, when I was a kid, I used to look at picture postcards with scenes of people wearing black turtleneck couples in the snow. And as it looks so wonderful, so picturesque. But when you are actually walking to the campus, up the hill at Syracuse, with your turtleneck or not in the snow, it's not as beautiful as it is on the postcard. It's a totally different experience.
If it only lasted 1 week, we could be,
Oh, it's beautiful, yes, 1 week. But, for 3 months in a place like Syracuse, it doesn't end until May. So you are in for the long haul. So, some of those things, but so it might not be directly autobiographical, but there is so much that I share in common with these young men and women. We come from the same long line. We come from the same long line of people who set out at dawn, as it were.
Yeah. Now, you can imagine that the American dream in this novel becomes the Italian dream, and this makes us Italian readers very curious. Yes. Also, this is making me think that this novel actually has been published in Italy first, right? We worked with the publisher Francesco Brioschi Editore from Milan, a small independent publisher.
I love that.
Very attentive. Me too. I have to say, very attentive to literatures from various parts of the world, from various regions. So they asked Gioia Guerzoni, who's the translator of your novel, and myself to begin an African series. And yours is one of the first titles. The first is Emanuele Dumas' A Stranger's Pose, and your novel is the second novel to be published in this series. But differently from the first text that we published by Iduma, your novel, when the publisher acquired the rights to publish it, it was forthcoming in English. But then we were like good enough as to beat the English, publishing world. What happened? Tell us this story. They don't like the Italian dream. They prefer to have the British or the American dream in the world. Yeah,
that's true. But this novel is really a love letter to Rome. Mm-hmm. I see that, that even if it's only published in Italian, it's very apropos. It's not surprising. Because really, the first line says, the first time I heard of Rome, I thought it was a place in heaven. Okay. And that kind of sets the tone of the entire book, so it's not surprising. But there's also the politics of publishing and, the technicalities of publishing. Thankfully, it's coming out in English this year. Yeah. But it's not surprising that it first found love in Italy and in Rome, because the narrator has this naive, perfect view of what Rome is like. And that's where he sets out to go to all the way from Gulu Station. Yeah, and we won't give any spoiler, but in the end, Rome is always this dream place, but at the same time, it's very close to how I see Rome. Have you been to Rome? Not at all. I've not even passed through Rome. That's the question that I'm most eager to answer. I have not even, I've had plans. I passed through most of Europe, through parts of Europe, but I've not passed through Rome. And we will fix that. Yes, we will fix that as soon as, my greatest fear is, the way it's imagined in this novel. Yeah. Is that the first day I arrive, is it going to be the same thing? But then that's also beautiful, because it's the same thing with this character. Rome of the imaginary and the real Rome turn out to be two totally different things. It's very interesting to hear that you've never been in Rome yet, because I was taking for granted that you knew Rome also from the final chapter. No spoiler, but readers will understand what I mean. Also, Rome, besides being the place with an ancient history, the old world we call it. When I first came to Nigeria, I said, "Oh, this is just like Italy. This is old world, nothing to do with my United States where I was coming from." But Rome is also, and you say it in the incipit that you read, it's a place that could be in heaven, like Jerusalem, Israel, Syria, Jordan, Abyssinia, and those types of places. You only hear their names in the holy books. You say in your beginning, in your incipit, and there is, I think, this almost sacred aspect in your prose, in your story, which I find very, very moving, very touching in many ways, because it's always, there is this sort of lightness, which is, which goes to the heart of things. And this sense of sacredness that is also connected to this young man, to this unnamed protagonist. Or am I seeing too much into it? And also, let me ask you, why did you leave him unnamed? Yeah, because he represents so many. He represents the legion. It's not one individual. He kind of represents the sensibility of most of us who have this picture of the other part of the world. That's what he represents. He's a representative of this idea of parts of Europe being heaven-like, being part of the idea of like the heavenly Jerusalem, which is different from the earthly Jerusalem. So he's representative of that kind of sensibility. But I also think, I'm excited that you've done some work on Tutuola. And you see that he shares a lot of things in common with Tutuola's heroes who are always on a quest. And Tutuola, of course, is mining from African, Nigerian, Yoruba oral storytelling tradition. So he's on a journey, like most characters on a journey in literature, even more so in African oral storytelling. He's on a journey to learn. It's usually a journey of discovery of the self and discovery of the world around you. Okay, so we see him, moving like that hero, whether it's the person who's in search of his dead tapster, or the person who is named from the Epic of Gilgamesh, who goes in search of the meaning of death. It's this same thread that runs through it. Searching for meaning, searching for the self, searching for meaning in the world around them. So he represents more of a type than an individual. We all set out with dreams like he does. Of course, reality would eventually shock us back into a reappraisal. But it's more important to set out with dreams because that's what makes you go. That's what makes you move. If you are not setting out with a dream, then you probably will not even live at all.
And dreams are always as sacred as journeys, because there is, I think, a sacred element in every journey. And in this sense, this is really a rite of initiation, exactly like the palm wine drinker embarks a journey in...
That's what the poet said, from dreams begin possibilities. I don't know where that said that, but I remember that line.
Yeah, it's a beautiful line. You're right. And also this year, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but we are celebrating or commemorating the 700th year of the death of Dante Alighieri. Yeah. And that's another, important figure for Italian letters, because, of course, Dante himself embarked a journey, except that was a journey through Inferno. Yeah. And then purgatory, and then he reached paradise, heaven. Yeah. So, in a way, it's a mythical structure that we keep telling, and we really keep hearing, because this is our life. This is our life. This is everybody's life. So it doesn't surprise me when you say that, you're also part of you is also.
Yeah, long line. I live in Rhode Island, and as you know, people would talk about Rhode Island as Italy Central. Have Italians there. And years ago, I met a kid who was, a little kid in middle school, and his name was Dante. And I said, do you know who you're named after? And he said, no. I said, you've never heard of Dante? He said, no. I said, who gave you that name? He said, my mom. I said, now you're going to go home and ask your mom who was Dante. And you're going to go to the library and find out who Dante was. And about a week later, when he saw me, his eyes was shining. He was so full of excitement he could talk. And he said, I'm so happy I'm named after this writer, this important person, and I didn't know all this while. And I said, that can come into your life, So that was a very touching moment for me.
Yeah, it's a beautiful story, and I mean it's another bridge right there. I have to tell you that again, my students, your fan club, we're wondering. Actually, we're betting literally on how old the protagonist is, and they have very precise ideas. So the range goes from 13, 14 to 18, 19 top. And of course, I'm tempted to ask, how old is this young man? Does it matter? This is what I would tell them. Does it matter? So I'm asking you,
it does matter, because, again, it's we kind of tend to equate age and wisdom in a way. He's very adventurous. He couldn't have been more than 18. He was 16 when he set out on this journey. And he couldn't have been more than 18. So he's not, but he's very wise. Don't forget that, for us Africans, there is the Western concept of school as a place where you go to learn. There is the Western concept of school as a place where you go to hear stories. Okay? There is the Western concept of school as a place where you go to learn about art and music and literature. But for us, it starts differently. It doesn't start with a book and a classroom. It actually starts from home. So take him, for example, the idea of storytelling. He probably has never read a novel in his life, but he lives with Nene, his grandmother, this old, wise, nearly blind woman who's like an oracle of sorts, and who speaks in these words of wisdom. She just spits knowledge. She's not capable of saying anything that's not wise or profound. And so that is his first school. There is the thing that Nene does, which, for instance, Nene wants him out of the house because, he's being a nuisance, a bit of a nuisance. What does she do? She doesn't say, oh, leave the house, get out of the house, I need some space. She sends him on what we'll call a wild goose chase. She says, go to this person's mom and ask him to give you this object called talantolo. Okay? And the moment he gets there and tells that lady, Nene said, you should give me the subject, the lady says, sit down, because that's a code. The lady already knows that's what you do to a child that is giving you too much trouble. So the lady says, oh, just wait, I'll look for it. And after a while, the lady says, oh, I forgot. Someone came to borrow it. Go to this person's mom, and she's going to give it to you. And he keeps going on this wild goose chase until ultimately he's tired and he's worn out, and he comes back home and he says, Nene, none of those people gave me the talent. And she says, don't worry, that's something you do to a kid who's giving you too much trouble so that they can give you some space. You see the teaching right there. Yeah. You see everything that's embodied in that. It's storytelling, it's philosophy, it's child psychology, it's all of that. And he didn't have to go to school to learn that. Yeah. So that's something he picks up right there from his grandmother. So grandparents, of course, are usually a repository of knowledge and a way for people to learn, a way for us to learn stories, to pick up proverbs, to pick up skills and the kind of knowledge. So it's not surprising that, he knows so much even at that age.
Yeah. And it's also cosmology. It's a way that you see the world. It's organized. This is something else that really struck me about this novel, Again, it's a reversal of perspective. When we hear about, these crossing stories from a European perspective, an Italian perspective, we think about these poor kids who are living, their unhappy places, leaving nothing behind, and their identity begins in the sea. And here it's a completely different story. It's a well-ordered world with happiness. You were mentioning Nene, which is such a wonderful character, who plays like a mother and a grandmother and an oracle, as you said, to him. But also Bros is another character whom I particularly loved. Bros is in love with Miss Koi Koi, and he sends, the young man to give her, gifts. And of course he lives in Rome. So this is another wonderful, in a way, representation of relationships also among different age groups. As a Sicilian, I fully relate to that. And Italians, are not that different from Nigerians in that sense. Family is so central. Yeah.
In many senses. Yeah, Bros is a scamp. Bros is an interesting fellow. Bros and it's Bros who brings this wave. It's Bros who brings this outside world to the station. It's Bros who brings the TV, the generator, the filler shirts, the boxes that had younger brothers as boxes and younger sisters as boxes. He goes and he brings this world to Gulu Station. And suddenly our narrator's eyes are open that there's a different world out there, different from the world of Nene and the world that he knows. But Bros is also interesting in that, despite the fact that he's been all over, he's been to Europe, he's kind of made money, he's become very comfortable, that he still sees that there is some kind of essence in the village. And so this woman who's a school teacher that he's been in love with, he comes back for her. But Ross also is the one who sows the seed in our narrative and says, whenever you are in Rome, knock on my door and, you're going to be welcome. Of course, let's not say how that's played out, So again, Bros is a bridge, to use that word. Bros is a bridge, that straddles these two worlds. He still has his one leg in village of Gulu Station. He has the other leg in Rome, and he brings the opportunity for this young narrator to see the world of Rome, while still being grounded in the world of Gulu Station.
I like the image of having one leg in one place and one leg in another place, because this is really
like that. It's even for me, after many years of living in the US, Nigeria is still home, very much so. You carry it around. You carry it around with you. You carry that you're still living in Nigeria in a certain sense, and weighing things, putting things side by side. Of course, you don't think about the exchange rates, but you always put things side by side. How does it taste? How does this smell? How is this different? And how is it the same?
I usually say I have more than one home. This is really how I feel also about places. Sometimes I get angry with Sicily. Sometimes I get angry with the United States, and then I have these bouts of nostalgia when I'm not there. Yeah. So it's really also complex, emotional, not only cerebral relationship. The one that we have to places, let alone political, right?
Yeah, you should have been in Cambridge this spring, right?
Yeah, I should have. Yeah, I should have.
You had a fellowship at Harvard where you were going to be at the Boer Center. So you ended up not coming. You're doing it virtually, right?
I'm doing it virtually from my desk and my, study place in Palermo. But again, thanks to the digital world to create bridges.
Which is interesting. And then you had also come to New England, as we call it, for grad school. So this, for you, what was it like? Even though you were living in Europe for North America, it's still migratory. You were still carrying a part of home. How was it for you? The weather shock, the culture shock, how was it different from you?
It's exactly as you described it. Or we have a mutual friend who was, a classmate in graduate school, Indibe, who was also was also a writer. Indibe, his novel Foreign Gods Inc. has been translated into Italian with Il Prezzo di Dio. He was also a guest in Venice, in Palermo, and so on and so forth. And he was describing, the cold, the physical shock, saying it's as if you open a fridge and put your head there all the time. And I totally related to that. I also moved to California for a postdoc later. So, I got different parts of the United States, but at the same time, I'm a professor of African literature mainly. So, we kind of share a similar geography, and I work mainly on Nigerian literature. Let me show you this little volume, La letteratura nigeriana in lingua inglese.
In English,
which I just published. So, I'm familiar with this notion of storytelling, and also with the Igbo cultures, Igbo stories, and I'm so glad that you mentioned Tutuola. I had put it down in my notes, because Amos Tutuola, published in Italian, never got out of press in Italy, which is also very interesting, with Il Bevitore di Vino di Palma, for those interested. Amos Tutuola really, in a way, set the basis for a genre. Like Achebe said, he's got his feet planted in the African soil of oral tradition, which is play and work at the same time. There is a pedagogical aspect, but also a lot of fun. So this is the beauty of your novel, that you read this story, which, my theoretical self has called it the Black Mediterranean. But on the other hand, you enjoy it while reading it. On the other hand, there are also other characters, Abdul, Ani, Aira, Zaid, Al-Qadar. One of them was a child soldier. Another one wanted to be a football player, a soccer player, and so on and so forth. So in a way, this journey is an individual journey for the protagonist, but it's also a collective journey, which is really, why also we chose this novel, because it really is a collective journey that about which we have just one vision, and that talks about strangers. In the Italian juridical texts, the juridical figure is not of who comes from elsewhere, is not an immigrant like in the United States. It's a stranger, and the stranger is a trope in literature. Who is a stranger in this novel? Are there any strangers?
That's very interesting, because I'm happy you introduced that word, because in the Igbo worldview, of course, you know that for the Igbos are probably the most migratory of all ethnic groups in Nigeria. That is, I'm talking of migration within Nigeria. One of the things that is said in jest, but also seriously, is that if you arrive a remote village anywhere and you don't find an Igbo man, don't stay there. Just okay, so the idea of travel and journey and being the stranger, there is a famous Igbo saying, I can't translate it properly into English for some reason, it's untranslatable, but it basically says that if you are a traveler or a stranger, you must work hard not to make enemies. Okay? And, growing up with my parents, one of the things that my mom always did, which I found very strange, was that no matter how much food there was, whether it was much or whether it was little, she would always leave some. And I'll say, why are you leaving some? And she will say, well, suppose we get a visitor or a stranger, what are they going to eat? And I always, as a child, I found that very strange, because, as a child, you're basically essentially a selfish being. People don't talk about that. But that's all you are, as a child. Your children are not typically altruistic, which is why they have to be taught to share when they go to preschool. You learn to share something to be taught. But basically, it's me. So I, as a child growing up, I always wondered, why are we leaving anything for strangers? Why are we leaving anything for visitors? They may never come, but there is also that ingrained notion that I inculcated very quickly, and many people of my generation did, that you must treat strangers with kindness, with generosity. You must look out for them. It's part of the culture, because you will be a stranger somewhere someday, So always leave some food just in case a stranger who has not eaten comes along. I don't know whether there is the equivalent, because one of the things that I've always liked to look at is even Western oral storytelling, Western oral literature. And one of those stories that always stuck out to me here, which I think theorizes different approaches, is the fact of, the grasshopper and the ant. I think, which makes the grasshopper playful, frittering away everything, enjoying the summer. And then when the winter months came, the grasshopper did not keep anything for itself. It did not preserve, it did not conserve. And so the grasshopper died. But the ant that had conserved and preserved stuff was able to survive. Okay. So, because we live in a place that is summer all the time, is it possible that we're like the grasshopper? And is it possible that for the European mind, especially those of them that come from the cold climate, that because, they live in winter and summer, they've learned to conserve self-preservation first, like what is on the airplane, put that thing over your nose first before you take care of any other person. It's something that has always fascinated me. I've often wondered, because the idea of the stranger and the visitor, the way it's seen in my part of the world is very different, from the way it's seen here. We're thought to embrace the visitor, to embrace the stranger, to welcome him, which is why the explorers who went to Africa were welcome. They were not attacked. They were welcome. They were just seen as strange, different people. But the world allows for all kinds of strangeness and all kinds of difference. And so they were just seen as strange, even if their religion was different. Okay, that's the way they worship their God. That's fine. So that was the way it was viewed. So I also think that, talking about moving a little bit to theory now, that in terms of the way people, the way this has been theorized, migration has been theorized, it strips the migrants of their individuality, which was something I had at the back of my mind when I was writing this book. Not that I theorized it much, but it does seem to appear that migrants are usually seen as a type. Okay, so this your huddled mass, these migrants on a boat. Okay, these young men and women who are illiterate or not so literate who are coming to this place because they've seen the lights and they want to grab what we have. But when you decide to break them up into individuals, you find that, this might not actually be such a huddled mass as much as they are named Ira and they are named Ifeanyi and they are named this. And these are people who come with different dreams coming from different backgrounds. So that individuation was something that I also thought was important to do in this book. Someone who is looking at you and I will say, well, you follow the same trajectory. You came to US for grad school, you taught here, you've done a bunch of fellowships, you're professors, you teach African literature and all of that. But of course, you and I know that we share some things in common, but we're also different in a way.
Absolutely. And you're also very, very correct when you say that this is, an individual experience. So it's a common experience that we can all relate to, but there is also each one of us goes through it in a different way. That's why I wanted also to read the names of the co-protagonists of the unnamed character's journey, because he remains unnamed and is symbolic, but he's got a lot of people or persona around him with names, with, fixed identities that become mobile identities. And this is really how life works. We are the strangers. We are, or the strangers are us, in Italy and not only in Italian, but also in English, in many other languages, we use the word barbarian also to refer to the stranger. But who are the barbarians? The barbarians are us.
The barbarians are people whose language sound like they're saying ba, 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 but that's not what they're saying. It's just that we don't understand what they're saying. So that's the way it sounds to us. I think that's the etymology of the word, but they are not really saying ba, ba, ba. It's just that we don't understand them. When we begin to understand them, then we know that they're saying buongiorno,
So I just want to ask you another couple of questions in the few minutes remaining that we have. The first, speaking about language, your use of language is absolutely masterful. It's so beautiful. And again, it's got the sensibility of a modern contemporary writer, but at the same time, I can hear the storytelling tradition. The use of proverbs in this novel is quite fascinating. Including the title. Is the title a proverb or is it one of Nene's pearls of wisdom?
I think it's probably a mixture of both,
Okay.
Just about readiness. It's just about the timing being right.
Okay.
About the timing being right. But it's not an African proverb. It's something that I came up with myself. Okay.
So you're adding, maybe it will become an African proverb. And
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah.
And also, speaking of strangers and barbarians, this is, the final question I would like to ask you is to give us your thought about a keyword in your most imminent writing in Italian, I hope as well, which is alien.
Yes.
Right? Because you have just published, if I'm correct, a collection of stories called Alien Stories. I haven't read it yet. It's just been published, if I'm correct. Yeah. I'm very curious. I'm looking forward to reading it. I hope you're looking for the book to show us.
I was looking for it. I hope I can grab it.
And again, I'm having my Osondu dream of this volume, because on the one hand, the word alien makes me think, of fantasy, science fiction, of a lot of contemporary film, TV series. The cover is also beautiful, I have to say. On the other hand, it's really connected to all the words that we've been, exploring in this dialogue, from the stranger to the traveler, and the barbarian. So who are these aliens? Why did you call this collection of stories Alien Stories? Do you want to tell us a bit about it before saying ciao, ciao?
Yeah, this is something I like to say, which is kind of like a quip, that sometimes in the United States, I think that it's much easier to embrace a character named E.T. than it is to embrace a person named E.C. E.T. being the extraterrestrial, from outer space, who came to the United States, and E.C. being me.
So, you're right.
I think the way that the word alien is explored in this new book is alien as extraterrestrial and alien as terrestrial. Alien as someone who comes from outer space, for instance, is a stranger. And the same alien as someone who is an immigrant from Nigeria is a stranger. That idea of estranging both the extraterrestrial alien and the terrestrial alien is what happens to all the characters in the book. So the book deals with a character from outer space, for instance, whose space ship breaks down in a tiny village in my part of the world, and then what happens thereafter. And alien as someone who comes from a different country and lives in the United States is something that I've been exploring, and it's something that continues to fascinate me. So the question is, do we treat one differently from the other? Does the alien who is from outer space feel any different from the alien who happens to have come from Nigeria? And the thing that led to the writing of this book is a phrase that I had many years ago, which someone used. I think a theorist used it, that, literature is about the disruption of the existing order. And it stuck out to me like disruption of the existing order, So I began to think, how is the existing order disrupted? The existing order is disrupted when something that is different, or somebody that is different, comes to a place where everyone is the same. And then the existing order is disrupted in some way. Another theorist says every novel is about a stranger comes to town. A stranger comes to town. So whether it's called a stranger, whether it's called an alien, whether it's called the unnamed narrator, in When the Sky is Ready, it's about how we estrange and how we estrange others.
Thank you very much for this wonderful, explanation of alien life, which can be, creative, which can be legal. And also thank you very much for introducing your next work to us. I mean, next for the Italian audience, because hopefully we're going to read it in translation as well. Yes. But let me show once again your novel first premiered in Italian.
Yes.
And so you can also tell your friend Dante and to learn Italian and read it in the meantime, while waiting for the original English text. Yes. And hopefully we can have you in Italy sometime soon as we're ready to to travel and to make virtual bridges, close proximity. So thank you very much. Ciao, Isi. Grazie mille.
And we have so much to talk about, and I hope that we meet in person and talk some more.
We definitely will, and Rome is waiting for you and for protagonists.
I can't wait. Thank you so much.
Ciao. Thank you. Grazie.